The first gunshot shattered the peaceful dawn over Willow Creek, Arizona territory, 1876, just as Nora Harrington lifted the water bucket from the well. Superstition clamped down on her heart like iron shackles, another bad omen, another death on the horizon. In the 3 years since her arrival out west, she'd learned to read the signs, and this day promised nothing but sorrow. "Third crow on the fence post this morning," she muttered to herself, setting the bucket down carefully despite her trembling hands. Shot before sunrise, bad news before noon. The distant wail of Mrs. Peterson from the neighboring homestead confirmed Nora's fears. Death had visited Willow Creek again, and somehow she knew it was connected to her. It always was. Nora tucked a loose strand of auburn hair behind her ear and smoothed her worn cotton dress. At 22 years old, she'd already witnessed more tragedy than most saw in a lifetime. Her parents, lost to cholera on the journey west. Her aunt and uncle who'd taken her in, dead within a year of her arrival, her uncle from a mining accident, her aunt from pneumonia the following winter. The young man who'd courted her briefly last spring, thrown from his horse and broken his neck mere days after their first kiss. "Cursed," she whispered, the word bitter on her tongue. "I am cursed." She carried the water inside her small cabin, careful not to spill a drop. Waste brought misfortune, and she had enough of that already. The cabin was modest but clean, the wooden floor swept, the few dishes washed and put away. A single bed with a patchwork quilt stood in the corner, a small table with 2 chairs by the window, and a cast-iron stove that provided both heat and a cooking surface. It wasn't much, but it was hers inherited from her aunt and uncle, along with enough money to keep her going if she was careful. A sharp knock at the door made her jump. Water sloshing over the rim of the bucket. "Miss Harrington?" Sheriff Miller's voice came through the wooden door. "May I have a word?" Nora closed her eyes, drew a deep breath, and wiped her damp hands on her apron before opening the door. "Morning, Sheriff. I heard the shot. Who was it this time?" The sheriff removed his hat, revealing thinning gray hair. His weathered face creased with concern. "Young Billy Peterson, cleaning his Piaz gun when it went off. Terrible accident." Nora's chest tightened. Billy was only 16, always smiling, always tipping his hat to her at church on Sundays. Just last week, he'd helped her carry groceries from the general store. "I'm so sorry," she said, meaning it more than the sheriff could know. His poor mother. "That's partly why I'm here, Miss Harrington. Mrs. Peterson is beside herself, and Doc Thompson's given her something to help her sleep. There's no other women nearby who could—" "I'll go sit with her," Nora said quickly. "Let me get my shawl." As she gathered her things, the sheriff cleared his throat. "There's one other matter, Miss Harrington. The stage brought a letter for you yesterday, from back east." He handed her a cream-colored envelope, the paper fine and expensive-looking. Nora took it with surprise. She had no one left to write to her, not back east or anywhere else. "Thank you, Sheriff. One more thing," he added, settling his hat back on his head. "Stage brought someone else, too. New fella in town. Says he's looking to buy the old Davidson ranch." He hesitated. "Seems a decent sort. Name's Beau Preston." Nora nodded absently, her attention on the mysterious letter. Another newcomer would likely just become another tragedy in her wake. Best to keep her distance. After the sheriff left, Nora tucked the unopened letter into her pocket. Mrs. Peterson's grief took precedence over her curiosity. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and headed toward the neighboring homestead, steeling herself for the raw sorrow she would find there. The Peterson house was filled with neighbors by the time she arrived, women bringing food, men speaking in hushed tones about funeral arrangements. Nora slipped through the crowd, feeling the familiar weight of suspicious glances. No one said it to her face anymore, but she knew what they whispered behind her back. Bad luck, harbinger of death, the cursed woman. Mrs. Peterson lay in her bed, her face pale, eyes closed in drug-induced sleep. Nora sat beside her, taking her limp hand. "I'll stay with her," she told the other women, who seemed relieved to be dismissed from the death watch. Hours passed as Nora sat vigilant, occasionally wiping Mrs. Peterson's brow with a cool cloth or adjusting her blankets. When the woman finally stirred, her eyes fluttered open, immediately filling with tears as reality returned. "My boy," she whispered. "My Billy." "I'm here, Mrs. Peterson," Nora said softly. "I'm so sorry." The woman's grief-stricken eyes focused on Nora's face, and a flicker of something anger, crossed her features. "You," she said, her voice hoarse. "They said you were with him yesterday." "At the store," Nora's heart sank. "He helped carry my packages, that's all." Mrs. Peterson struggled to sit up. "Every person who gets close to you meets misfortune. Everyone knows it. My Billy was a good boy. He never hurt anyone." "Mrs. Peterson, please." "Get out," the woman hissed, tears streaming down her face. "Get out of my house. Haven't you brought enough death to this town?" The words cut deep, but they weren't unfamiliar. Nora stood, gathering her shawl. "I truly am sorry for your loss," she said quietly, before slipping out of the bedroom. The conversation in the main room halted as she emerged, faces turning toward her with varying degrees of pity and suspicion. She kept her head high as she walked to the door, but their whispers followed her. Poor woman, first her husband in the mine, now her only son. "They say the Harrington girl—" "Hush now, she'll hear you." "Can't be coincidence, though. Everyone she touches—" Nora closed the door behind her, cutting off the gossip. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as she started the walk back to her cabin. Halfway there, exhaustion and emotion overcame her, and she sank onto a fallen log at the side of the path, finally allowing her tears to fall. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her hastily wipe her face. A rider was coming up the path from town, a stranger on a chestnut stallion. Nora quickly composed herself, rising to her feet and preparing to continue on her way with a brief nod to the passing rider. But the man slowed his horse as he approached, tipping his hat. "Afternoon, madam. Might you be able to point me toward the Davidson property?" Nora looked up at the stranger, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. His dark hair curled slightly beneath his hat, and a day's worth of stubble shadowed his strong jaw. He was handsome in a rugged way, but it was the kindness in his expression that caught her off guard. "It's about 3 miles further up this road," she replied, gesturing ahead. "You'll see the split rail fence first, then the house is set back among the cottonwoods." "Much obliged," he said, then hesitated, studying her face. "Forgive me for saying so, but you look like you could use a friend right about now." Nora stiffened. "I'm fine. Thank you, Mr. Preston." Beau Preston. He swung down from his horse with easy grace, looping the reins around a nearby branch. "And you're not fine at all, if you don't mind my saying so." "I do mind," she replied, taking a step back. "Mr. Preston, it's been a difficult day in our community. A young man died this morning." Understanding softened his features. "I heard in town. A terrible accident." "Yes. Now, if you'll excuse me." "At least let me escort you home," he offered. "These parts can be dangerous for a lady alone." "I've managed just fine for 3 years, Mr. Preston, and you should know." She paused, then decided he might as well hear it now, before he wasted any more kindness on her. "The people around here consider me bad luck. They say I'm cursed. If you're planning to settle in Willow Creek, you'd be wise to keep your distance." Instead of looking shocked or afraid, Beau Preston smiled a slow, warm smile that reached his eyes. "I've never been one to put much stock in superstition, Miss Harrington, Nora Harrington." "Well, Miss Harrington, I believe we make our own luck in this world." He offered his arm. "Now, may I see you safely home? I promise not to drop dead at your doorstep." The joke was so unexpected, so inappropriate, and yet somehow exactly what she needed to hear. A surprised laugh escaped her lips before she could stop it. "That's better," he said, his smile widening. "A pretty face like yours was made for smiling, not tears." Nora hesitated, then shook her head. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Preston, but I really would prefer to walk alone. The Davidson place is as I described. Good day to you." She stepped around him and continued down the path, feeling his eyes on her back. Part of her wanted to turn around, to accept his company, but a stronger part, the part that had watched too many people die, kept her moving forward, alone. When she reached her cabin, she remembered the letter in her pocket. Sitting at her small table, she broke the wax seal and unfolded the expensive paper. "Dear Miss Harrington," it began in elegant script, "you do not know me, but I was a dear friend of your mother's in our youth. I have only recently learned of your parents' tragic passing and your current circumstances. I write to offer you a position in my household in Boston as companion to my daughter. The enclosed bank draft should cover your travel expenses. I await your reply. Yours sincerely, Agatha Thornfield." Nora stared at the letter, reading it 3 times to be sure she understood. A way out. A chance to leave Willow Creek and its whispers behind. A new beginning where no one knew of her curse. The bank draft was indeed enclosed more money than she'd seen at one time since her parents died. Enough to take her far away from Arizona territory, back to civilization, to a place where she might start fresh. "Thank you, Mother," she whispered to the empty room. "Thank you for sending me this chance." That night, Nora slept better than she had in months, dreaming of Boston townhouses and proper tea parties, of a life free from the weight of death and suspicion. By morning, her decision was made. She would accept Mrs. Thornfield's offer and leave Willow Creek as soon as arrangements could be made. She spent the day packing her few possessions and writing a response to Mrs. Thornfield, planning to take it to town the next day to catch the eastbound stage. The task gave her a sense of purpose, of hope that had been missing for too long. As evening fell, she was startled by another knock at her door. This time, when she opened it, Beau Preston stood on her porch, hat in hand. "Mr. Preston," she said, surprised. "What brings you here?" "Good evening, Miss Harrington. I apologize for the intrusion, but I wanted to make sure you were all right after yesterday." "That's very kind of you, but unnecessary." He shifted his weight, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "I've also come with a proposal of sorts. I've purchased the Davidson Ranch, and I find myself in need of someone who knows the area to help me get established." Nora frowned. "There are plenty of folks in town who could assist you." "Yes, but they're not you." His directness caught her off guard. "Miss Harrington, I'll be frank. I heard the talk in town about your supposed curse. It's nonsense, of course. Bad luck happens to everyone, and small minds look for patterns where none exist." "You don't know what you're talking about," she said quietly. "Everyone who gets close to me suffers misfortune." "Coincidence," he insisted. "Nothing more. You can't know that. Neither can you." He took a step closer. "I'm offering you employment, Miss Harrington. Decent wages for honest work. I need someone to help manage the household while I focus on getting the ranch operational." Nora shook her head. "I'm leaving Willow Creek, Mr. Preston. I've received an offer of employment back east. I'll be gone within the week." Disappointment flashed across his features. "I see. Well, that's good news for you, I suppose." He placed his hat back on his head. "If you change your mind, my offer stands until you leave." "I won't change my mind," she said firmly. "Good night, Mr. Preston." After he left, Nora sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of orange and pink. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future one without fear, without the weight of imagined responsibility for others' fates. Yet, as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, a small voice inside her whispered that running away wouldn't break the curse. It would follow her to Boston, to Mrs. Thornfield's fine house, to her new life. It would always find her. She pushed the thought away. Tomorrow she would mail her letter and purchase her stage ticket. In a week's time, Willow Creek would be nothing but a painful memory. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. The next morning dawned with an ominous crimson sunrise that set Nora's nerves on edge. As she prepared to walk into town, dark clouds began gathering on the horizon, and the air grew heavy with the promise of a storm. She had just locked her cabin door when she heard it. The distant rumble of hooves, too many for a single rider or even a small group. Shielding her eyes against the morning sun, she peered down the road toward town and felt her blood run cold. Riders, at least a dozen, moving fast and purposeful. Even from a distance, she could see they weren't townspeople. Their manner of dress, the way they sat their horses, these were Apache warriors, and they were headed straight for Willow Creek. Raids had been rare in recent years, with most of the Apache confined to reservations, but stories circulated of bands who had escaped, who still resisted the white encroachment on their lands. Nora had dismissed such tales as exaggerations meant to frighten women and children. Now, faced with the reality, terror seized her. Without thinking, she began running toward town, as if her presence might somehow prevent the impending violence. She hadn't gone 50 yards when a rider appeared from a side trail, Beau Preston, his face grim. "Miss Harrington, get on, quickly!" He extended his hand. She hesitated only a moment before grasping it, allowing him to pull her up behind him on his horse. "The town," she gasped. "We have to warn them." "They already know," he said, turning his horse away from town. "Sheriff spotted them coming and rang the church bell. Everyone's either barricaded in the mercantile or headed for the hills." He glanced back at her. "I came looking for you as soon as I heard." "You came back for me?" The notion was so unexpected she could barely process it. "Couldn't leave you out here alone," he replied, urging his horse into a gallop. "I'm taking you to my place. It's defensible." As they rode hard for the Davidson ranch, his ranch now, Nora clung to his waist, her mind racing. The Apache, Billy's death, the curse, her plans to leave it all swirled together in a maelstrom of fear and confusion. "It's happening again," she said, more to herself than to him. "Death follows me everywhere." Beau's voice carried back to her, steady and sure despite their breakneck pace. "This isn't about you, Miss Harrington. The Apache have been restless ever since the Army violated the treaty last month." "But why today? Just as I was planning to leave." He didn't answer, focusing instead on guiding his horse across a shallow creek and up the incline toward his property. The Davidson ranch house came into view, a solid 2-story structure of stone and timber, surrounded by cottonwoods as she had described. They reached the house just as the first heavy raindrops began to fall. Beau dismounted in one fluid motion, then helped Nora down before leading his horse to the barn. "Get inside," he instructed. "I'll tend to Samson and be right in." The interior of the ranch house was sparsely furnished but clean. The previous owners had left some furniture, a table and chairs, a sideboard, a settee by the large stone fireplace. Beau had obviously brought his own belongings as well. Books lined a shelf, and a fine saddle rested on a stand in the corner. Nora stood uncertainly in the main room, listening to the rain begin to pound on the roof. Through the window, she could see Beau jogging from the barn, rifle in hand. The sight reminded her of the danger they faced, and she moved to close the heavy wooden shutters on all the windows. Beau entered, shaking water from his hat. "Storm's going to be a bad one. Might work in our favor. Apache don't usually raid in this weather." "Usually?" He gave her a tight smile. "Nothing's certain out here, as I'm sure you know." Nora sank onto the settee, suddenly aware of how strange her situation was, alone in a remote ranch house with a man she barely knew, while danger lurked both outside and, if her fears were correct, within her very presence. "Mr. Preston." "Beau," he corrected, setting his rifle by the door and moving to light the lamps. "If we're going to be riding out a raid in a storm together, I think we can dispense with formalities." "Beau," she conceded, "you don't understand. Being here with me, it's dangerous for you." He paused in the act of striking a match, looking at her with those clear blue eyes. "Because of your curse?" There was no mockery in his tone, only genuine interest. "It's not something I can explain or prove, but yes, bad things happen to people who get close to me. They die." The match flared as he lit the lamp, illuminating his face in the growing gloom of the stormy afternoon. "Everyone dies eventually, Miss Harrington." "Nora," she said quietly. "And you know what I mean. Unnatural deaths, accidents, illness. It started with my parents on the trail west, then my aunt and uncle who took me in, then a young man who courted me. Now, Billy Peterson, just a day after helping me with my packages." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I was supposed to leave, go back east, break the pattern. Beau moved to the fireplace, kneeling to arrange kindling and logs. "And yet here you are, with me." "Yes," she whispered, "and I'm terrified of what might happen to you because of it." He struck another match, holding it to the kindling until flames began to lick upward. "Let me tell you something about curses, Nora." He stood, dusting off his hands. "I've been across this country from Tennessee to California, met all sorts of people with all sorts of beliefs, spent time with Shoshone up north who believe in spirit magic, rode with a fella from New Orleans who carried voodoo charms." He sat beside her on the settee, not too close, but near enough that she could see the firelight reflected in his eyes. "In all that time, I've come to believe only one thing about luck and fate and curses. We give them the power they have over us. Nothing more." "That's a convenient philosophy when nothing bad has happened to you," she replied. His expression darkened. "You think I haven't seen my share of tragedy? My mother died bringing my sister into this world. Pa turned to drink afterward. Lost our farm. My sister died of scarlet fever when she was 12. I buried my best friend after Shiloh." He shook his head. "I could call myself cursed too. But what would that accomplish?" The revelation of his past losses silenced her. She'd assumed from his easy confidence and optimism that he'd led a charmed life. "I'm sorry," she said finally, "about your family. And I'm sorry about yours." He reached for the poker to adjust a log in the fire. "But neither of us caused those deaths. They're just part of life out here, harsh and often unfair." Thunder crashed overhead, making Nora jump. Beau rose and moved to the window, carefully peering out through a crack in the shutters. "Rain's coming down in sheets now. We might be here a while." He turned back to her. "Are you hungry? I've got beans and bacon. Not fancy, but it'll keep body and soul together." The simple domestic question in the midst of their extraordinary circumstances made Nora smile despite herself. "I could eat, yes, and I can cook if you'd like. No need to stand on ceremony. I manage well enough on my own." As he busied himself at the stove, Nora watched him, the easy, confident way he moved, the strength in his hands as he worked. There was something comforting about his presence, something that made her want to believe he was right about curses and luck. "Why did you come looking for me?" she asked suddenly. "When you heard about the raid, you barely know me." He didn't turn from the stove. "I know enough." "What does that mean?" Beau was silent for a moment. Then he set down the spoon he was using and faced her. "It means I know what it's like to be the outsider. To have people look at you sideways because they don't understand you or they're afraid of what you represent. And what do I represent? Their fears, their superstitions, the random cruelty of life that they need to explain somehow." He returned to stirring the beans. "It's easier to blame a curse or a person they think carries one than to accept that sometimes terrible things just happen." Nora considered his words as the storm raged outside. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps the townsfolk needed someone to blame for the harsh realities of frontier life. But that didn't explain all the deaths that had occurred around her. "What about the Apache?" she asked, changing the subject. "Do you think they'll attack the town?" "Hard to say. They might have just been passing through or scouting. The storm will probably drive them to shelter." He spooned beans onto 2 tin plates and added thick slices of bacon. "In any case, we're better off waiting it out here." They ate in companionable silence, the crackling fire and drumming rain the only sounds. As Nora finished her meal, exhaustion swept over her, the emotional toll of the past 2 days, combined with the fear and adrenaline of their escape, catching up all at once. Beau noticed her stifling a yawn. "There's a bedroom upstairs you can use. Previous owners left a bed. Clean sheets too, put them on myself yesterday." "I couldn't impose. It's no imposition. I've been sleeping in the bunkhouse anyway, closer to the horses." Nora wanted to protest further, but found she didn't have the energy. "Thank you. For everything." He nodded, taking her plate. "Get some rest. I'll keep watch." The upstairs bedroom was simply furnished, but comfortable. Nora removed her boots and outer garments, then slipped under the quilt in her chemise and petticoat. Despite the storm and the uncertainty, sleep claimed her almost immediately. She dreamed of running through endless prairie grass, pursued by something she couldn't see but could feel getting closer. Just as it was about to catch her, strong arms lifted her away, carrying her to safety. She looked up to see Beau's face above hers, his eyes kind, his voice soothing as he murmured, "You're not cursed. You're a blessing." Nora woke with a start, disoriented in the unfamiliar room. Pale morning light filtered through cracks in the shutters, and the storm had passed, leaving behind the fresh scent of rain-washed earth. For a moment she lay still, remembering her dream and the strange comfort it had brought. A soft knock at the door preceded Beau's voice. "Nora, are you awake? I've made coffee." "Yes, I'm up," she called back, quickly rising to dress. "I'll be down in a moment." Downstairs, she found Beau at the table, cleaning his rifle. He looked up as she entered, a smile warming his features. "Sleep well?" "Better than I expected," she admitted. "Any sign of the Apache?" He shook his head. "Not a trace, but I rode into town at first light. They hit the Peterson place." Nora's heart sank. "Mrs. Peterson, is she? She's alive. They took some livestock, supplies, burned the barn. She was hiding in the root cellar the whole time." Guilt crashed over Nora like a physical blow. If she hadn't been at the Peterson farm when the raid began, if she hadn't left Mrs. Peterson alone after their confrontation, perhaps things would have been different. "I should have been there," she whispered. Beau set down the rifle, his expression serious. "And done what exactly? Gotten yourself killed or captured? Mrs. Peterson is alive because she hid, not because anyone stood and fought. But if I hadn't left her—" "Stop." His voice was firm but gentle. "This isn't your fault, Nora. None of it is. Not Billy's accident, not the raid, not your parents or your aunt and uncle or anyone else who's died. Bad things happen in this world, especially out here on the frontier, and they have nothing to do with you or any curse." Tears pricked at her eyes. "You can't know that. I know that blaming yourself for events beyond your control is a kind of arrogance," he said, surprising her, "as if you have the power to influence fate." Arrogance, the accusation stung. "You think I want this? You think I enjoy believing everyone I care about will die?" "I think," he said carefully, "that carrying the weight of a curse gives you an excuse not to get close to people. Not to risk your heart." Nora stepped back as if he'd slapped her. "How dare you? You know nothing about me or what I've suffered. I know you're running away to Boston instead of facing your fears here." He stood, moving toward her. "I know you'd rather believe in some supernatural curse than accept that life is uncertain and often cruel, but also beautiful and worth the risk." "Stop," she said, holding up her hands. "Just stop. You have no right to judge me or my choices." His expression softened. "I'm not judging you, Nora. I'm challenging you. There's a difference." Before she could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. Beau moved swiftly to the window, then relaxed. "It's Sheriff Miller and some men from town." He gave her a questioning look. "You still want to leave on today's stage?" The question caught her off guard. With everything that had happened, she'd almost forgotten her plans to go east. Yes, of course." But even as she said it, uncertainty crept in. Was she running from a curse or from the possibility of finding happiness here? Beau nodded, his expression unreadable. "Then I'll have the sheriff escort you back to your cabin to collect your things." When the sheriff and his posse arrived, they brought news that the Apache had moved on, last seen heading south toward the border. The town had survived with minimal damage, though several outlying farms had been raided for supplies. "Folks are saying it was a blessing the raid happened during the storm," Sheriff Miller said. "Slowed them down, kept them from doing worse damage." Nora caught Beau's eye at the word blessing, remembering her dream. He gave her a slight smile before turning back to the sheriff. "Miss Harrington needs an escort back to her cabin. She's catching today's stage east." The sheriff looked surprised. "You're leaving us, Miss Harrington?" "I've received an employment offer in Boston," she explained. "It seems providential, given recent events." "I see." The sheriff glanced between her and Beau. "Well, we can certainly see you safely home." As Nora gathered her shawl, Beau approached her. "I meant what I said yesterday," he said quietly. about needing help with the ranch. The offer still stands if you change your mind. Thank you, but my decision is made. Is it? His eyes searched hers. Or are you just following the path of least resistance? Mr. Preston. Beau, he corrected. Beau, she conceded. What happened yesterday doesn't change anything. The curse is real, whether you believe it or not. He took her hand, his touch warm and steady. Then prove it. Stay 1 month. Work for me. If I meet with some terrible fate, you can leave with your beliefs confirmed. If not, he shrugged, maybe you'll have to consider another explanation for your life's tragedies. That's a reckless gamble with your life. I'm willing to take that chance. He squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. Think about it on your way back to town. The stage doesn't leave until noon. The ride to her cabin was quiet, Nora lost in thought as the sheriff made occasional comments about the weather or the condition of the road after the storm. When they arrived, he tipped his hat and promised to return in an hour to escort her to the stage office. Alone in her cabin, Nora looked at her packed belongings, the letter from Mrs. Thornfield, the bank draft that promised escape. All she had to do was board that stage, and within weeks she would be in Boston, starting a new life far from the deaths and whispers of Willow Creek. But Beau's words echoed in her mind. Was she being arrogant, assuming she had the power to cause death? Was she using the curse as an excuse to avoid emotional connections? The questions unsettled her, challenging beliefs she'd held for years. She picked up the letter again, reading Mrs. Thornfield's elegant script. A position as companion to her daughter. Respectable, safe, predictable. No risk, no chance of growing close to anyone who might become another victim of her curse. No possibility of discovering if Beau Preston was right. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Expecting the sheriff, she was surprised to find Mrs. Peterson on her porch, looking exhausted and grief-stricken, but composed. Mrs. Peterson, Nora said, shocked. Please come in. The older woman entered hesitantly. Sheriff Miller mentioned you were leaving on today's stage. I wanted to see you before you went. Nora's chest tightened with apprehension. I'm so sorry about your home and about Billy. If there's anything I can do, that's why I'm here, Mrs. Peterson interrupted. To apologize. Nora blinked in surprise. Apologize? Mrs. Peterson sank into a chair, her shoulders slumped with weariness. For what I said to you. About being cursed, bringing death. It was cruel and unfair. I was mad with grief, but that's no excuse. You don't need to apologize, Nora said softly. I understand. No, I do need to. The woman looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. Last night, hiding in that root cellar while those Apache tore through my home, I had a lot of time to think. About Billy, about life, about blame. She twisted her wedding ring absently. My husband always said blaming others for your troubles was the coward's way out. He was right. Nora sat across from her, uncertain how to respond. Billy's death was an accident, Mrs. Peterson continued, pure and simple. He'd been told 100 times to be careful with firearms, but he was a boy, and boys can be careless. She reached across the table to take Nora's hand. It had nothing to do with you. None of the tragedies in this town did. The words, so similar to what Beau had said, struck Nora deeply. But so many people around me have died. People die out here all the time, Mrs. Peterson said bluntly. It's a hard country. My Henry used to say we're all just one bad winter or one broken wheel away from meeting our maker. She squeezed Nora's hand. The new rancher, Mr. Preston, he came by this morning. Offered me a place to stay until my house is repaired, said he needed a housekeeper anyway. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. He mentioned you might be working for him too. He offered, but I'm leaving for Boston. Mrs. Peterson nodded slowly. Running away won't fix what's broken inside you, child. Trust me on that. After Henry died, I wanted to pack up and go back east. Billy was the one who convinced me to stay, to make our life here. Her eyes filled with fresh tears. I'm staying now, too. It's what he would have wanted. The older woman's quiet dignity in the face of overwhelming loss humbled Nora. She'd lost everything: husband, son, and now her home, yet she wasn't running. She was rebuilding. "I don't know what to do," Nora admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, you do," Mrs. Peterson replied, rising. "You're just afraid to do it. Fear's a powerful force, but it's a poor compass for life's journey." She moved toward the door. "Whatever you decide, I wish you well, Nora Harrington." After Mrs. Peterson left, Nora sat motionless, her mind whirling. The stage would leave in less than an hour. She needed to make her decision. Boston represented safety, anonymity, a chance to escape the weight of her supposed curse. But it also meant running from her fears, as both Beau and Mrs. Peterson had suggested. It meant never knowing if the curse was real or simply a story she told herself to make sense of random tragedy. Staying meant risk the risk that someone else might die, but also the risk of opening her heart, of allowing herself to care again, to hope again. The sheriff's knock came right on time. When Nora opened the door, he was surprised to see her unpacked bag still sitting by the table. "Miss Harrington? The stage will be leaving soon." Nora took a deep breath, feeling as though she stood on the edge of a cliff. "Sheriff Miller, I wonder if you might do me a favor. Could you return this letter and bank draft to the stage office? It needs to go back east with a note declining the position." The sheriff's bushy eyebrows rose. "You're not leaving?" "No," she said, and for the first time in years her voice held no trace of fear or resignation. "I've accepted a position with Mr. Preston. It seems he needs someone who knows the area to help him get established." A smile broke across the sheriff's weathered face. "Well, now that's good news indeed. Preston seems a fine man. Offered to help rebuild the Peterson place, you know. Even talked about organizing the ranchers to establish a proper defense against future raids." As the sheriff took the letter and prepared to leave, he paused. "People will talk, you know. A single woman working for a bachelor." "People already talk about me, Sheriff. At least this will give them something new to discuss." After he left, Nora gathered a few necessities into a carpet bag, enough for a few days at the ranch, until she could properly move her belongings. As she closed the cabin door behind her, she felt a strange lightness, as if she'd set down a burden she'd carried for far too long. The walk to Beau's ranch would take over an hour, but the day was clear and mild after the storm, the desert landscape washed clean, wildflowers already beginning to poke through the sand and scrub. For the first time in years, Nora allowed herself to appreciate the harsh beauty of the Arizona territory, the distant purple mountains, the vast sky, the resilient plants that thrived despite the challenging conditions. She was about halfway to the ranch when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking up, she saw Beau riding toward her, his figure silhouetted against the afternoon sun. He slowed as he reached her, his expression cautiously hopeful. "Miss Harrington, I thought you'd be on the stage by now." "I declined Mrs. Thornfield's offer," she said simply. "It seems I have unfinished business here in Willow Creek." His smile was slow and warm, reaching all the way to his eyes. "Does that unfinished business include helping a newcomer get his ranch in order?" "It might," she matched his smile with one of her own. "If the offer still stands." "It does." He extended his hand down to her. "Need a ride the rest of the way?" Nora hesitated only briefly before taking his hand, allowing him to pull her up behind him on the horse. As they rode toward the ranch, toward an uncertain future that suddenly seemed full of possibility rather than dread, she found herself relaxing, her arms around his waist, her cheek resting lightly against his back. "I still can't promise you won't regret this," she said as the ranch came into view. "The curse isn't real," he finished for her, his voice carrying back to her on the gentle breeze. "And I aim to prove it to you, one day at a time." The following weeks passed in a blur of activity. True to his word, Beau organized the neighboring ranchers to help rebuild the Peterson homestead, with Nora and Mrs. Peterson, widow Peterson, as she preferred to be called, working side by side to restore the interior. The older woman moved into the Davidson ranch house temporarily, providing a proper chaperone for Nora's employment there and silencing the worst of the gossip from town. Nora found herself busier than she had been in years, rising at dawn to prepare breakfast, then spending her days helping Beau establish the ranch. She cataloged supplies, organized the household, planted a vegetable garden, and even learned to keep the ranch's simple accounts. In the evenings, she, Beau, and the widow Peterson would sit on the porch watching the sunset, sometimes joined by the two cowboys Beau had hired to help with the cattle he'd purchased. Gradually, Nora began to relax, to let go of her constant vigilance against disaster. Beau remained healthy and whole, despite her proximity. No accidents befell him, no illness struck. The ranch prospered, the Peterson house rose anew, and life in Willow Creek continued. The most remarkable change, however, was in how people treated her. Whether it was Beau's influence as a respected newcomer or simply the passage of time dulling old superstitions, the whispers about her curse faded. When she went into town for supplies, she was greeted with friendly nods instead of averted gazes. At church on Sundays, women who had once edged away now asked her to join their quilting circle. "See," Beau said one evening as they sat alone on the porch, widow Peterson having retired early. "No curse, just people and their foolish notions which they're finally letting go of." "It does seem that way," Nora admitted, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. "But it's only been a month." "The month you promised me," he reminded her, "and I'm still standing." She glanced at him, taking in his strong profile, the way the last light of day gilded his features. In the weeks she'd worked for him, her admiration had grown into something deeper, something that frightened her with its intensity. "Yes, you are," she acknowledged, "against all odds." "Not against odds," he corrected, "just according to the natural order of things. Most days, most people don't die or meet with disaster." "I suppose that's true." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "Your month is up, Nora. You fulfilled your promise. If you still want to go to Boston, I won't stop you." The thought of leaving, of never seeing him again, created a physical ache in her chest. "And if I want to stay? Then I'd be the happiest man in the Arizona Territory." He took her hand, his touch sending warmth up her arm. "But I need to know you're staying because you want to, not because you feel obligated or afraid." "Afraid?" "Afraid that if you leave, something will happen to me, and you'll blame yourself." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "That's not living free, Nora. That's still being ruled by the curse." She hadn't considered that perspective, but he was right. If she stayed out of fear for his safety, she was still giving power to the superstition. "I want to stay," she said softly. "Not because I'm afraid, but because for the first time in years I feel at home." His smile in the gathering darkness was like a beacon. "That's good to hear, because I've grown mighty accustomed to having you around." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken feelings. Then, with a gentle squeeze of her hand, he released her and stood. "It's getting late. Widow Peterson will be wondering where we are." As they walked back into the house, Nora felt a curious mixture of disappointment and anticipation. Something had changed between them tonight. A door had opened, even if neither of them was quite ready to step through it. Summer gave way to fall, and the ranch settled into a comfortable routine. Widow Peterson, her home fully restored, decided to stay on as Beau's housekeeper, allowing Nora to focus on other aspects of ranch management. She discovered a talent for breeding horses, an interest Beau encouraged by teaching her everything he knew about bloodlines and training. Their days were filled with hard work, their evenings with conversation and laughter. Occasionally, Beau would read aloud from one of his books poetry or adventure stories that transported them beyond the ranch's boundaries. Sometimes Nora would sing songs her mother had taught her, her clear voice filling the main room as Beau watched her with undisguised admiration. Neither of them spoke directly of deeper feelings, but they were there in every shared glance, every casual touch, every moment of comfortable silence. Nora found herself thinking less and less about curses and tragedy and more about possibility and future. Then, in late October, disaster struck. It began with a cough, just a tickle in Widow Peterson's throat that she dismissed as dust from the harvest. Within days, however, she was bedridden with fever, her breathing labored, her face flushed. "Pneumonia," Doc Thompson pronounced after examining her. "Nasty case, too. Her lungs were probably weakened from the smoke during the raid." Nora felt the old familiar dread creeping back. "Will she recover?" The doctor's expression was grave. "Hard to say. Her age isn't in her favor. Keep her warm, get plenty of fluids in her, and pray." For the next week, Nora barely left the widow's bedside, applying cool compresses to her forehead, spooning broth between her cracked lips, helping her sit up to ease her breathing. Beau took over all the household duties without complaint, bringing meals to Nora, insisting she rest when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. "You can't help her if you collapse yourself," he said gently, guiding Nora to a chair by the fire one evening after she'd swayed on her feet. "I can't lose her," Nora whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Not like my aunt. Not the same way." Beau knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "Listen to me. If Widow Peterson dies, and I'm not saying she will, it won't be because of you. It will be because pneumonia is a dangerous illness, especially for someone her age. But don't you see? It's starting again. I let myself believe, I let myself care, and now you're facing what everyone faces in this life," he interrupted firmly. "The possibility of losing someone you love. That's not a curse, Nora. That's being human." His words penetrated her despair, offering a perspective she hadn't considered. Everyone faced loss. Everyone risked heartbreak when they opened themselves to love. Her situation wasn't unique or supernatural, it was the common condition of humanity. "I'm scared," she admitted, allowing herself to lean into his strength. "I know." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "But you're not alone. Not anymore." That night, as Widow Peterson's fever peaked, Nora and Beau kept vigil together. The older woman's breathing grew increasingly labored, each inhale a desperate struggle. In the darkest hours before dawn, when hope seemed furthest away, Nora found herself praying not just for the widow's recovery, but for the strength to face whatever came with courage rather than superstition. As the first gray light of morning filtered through the curtains, Widow Peterson's fever broke. Her breathing eased and she fell into a natural healing sleep for the first time in days. "She's going to be all right," Doc Thompson confirmed later that morning, his weathered face creased with relief. "Still a long recovery ahead, but the worst is past." Exhausted but elated, Nora stepped onto the porch for a breath of fresh air. Beau joined her, his own fatigue evident in the shadows beneath his eyes. "You did it," he said, bumping her shoulder gently with his. "You saved her." "We saved her," Nora corrected. "I couldn't have managed without you." He studied her face. "You look different." "Exhausted, you mean?" "No." He shook his head slowly. "Free. You look free." And she realized he was right. For the first time since her parents' deaths, she felt unburdened by the weight of imagined responsibility for others' fates. Widow Peterson had hovered at death's door and returned not because of any curse or its absence, but simply because life was unpredictable, full of both suffering and recovery, sorrow and joy. "I feel free," she acknowledged, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "Like I've been carrying chains for years and finally put them down." Beau's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "That's all I've ever wanted for you." As fall deepened toward winter, Nora's relationship with Beau evolved. No longer simply employer and employee, they became partners in the truest sense, sharing responsibilities, making decisions together about the ranch, supporting each other through challenges. Their feelings for each other grew more evident, though neither rushed to declare them openly. Widow Peterson, recovering slowly but steadily, watched their growing closeness with approval. "That man looks at you like you hung the moon," she told Nora one afternoon as they shelled peas on the porch. "And you're not much better at hiding your feelings." Nora blushed. "Is it that obvious?" "To anyone with eyes," the widow chuckled. "Life's too short to waste time dancing around what you both want. My Henry courted me for exactly 2 weeks before proposing, and we had 30 good years together." Things are complicated between us, only because you make them so." The older woman set down her bowl of peas with a decisive thump. "That cursed nonsense is behind you now. Don't let it keep you from happiness just because you're used to denying yourself." The wisdom in her words struck Nora deeply. Was she still holding back out of habit, still protecting herself from potential loss by not fully embracing what she and Beau could have together? That evening, as they sat by the fire after Widow Peterson had retired, Nora found herself studying Beau's profile, admiring the strong line of his jaw, the thoughtful set of his mouth as he read from a book of Emerson's essays. He must have felt her gaze because he paused mid-sentence and turned to her with a questioning smile. "Something on your mind?" "Yes," she said simply. "You." His eyes widened slightly, the book forgotten in his lap. "Me?" "I've been thinking about what you said the day I decided to stay, about not living in fear." She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I'm not afraid anymore, Beau. Not of curses or bad luck or losing people I care about." "I'm glad to hear that." His voice was soft, encouraging. "But I'm afraid of one thing." She moved closer to him on the settee, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. "I'm afraid of never telling you how I feel, of wasting more time when life is so uncertain." Beau set the book aside, his full attention on her. "And how do you feel, Nora Harrington?" "Like I've been sleepwalking through life until I met you." The words came easier than she'd expected. "Like you woke me up, showed me there was more to living than just surviving, made me believe in possibilities again." She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. "I love you, Beau Preston. I think I have since that day on the road when you offered me your arm and promised not to drop dead on my doorstep." His laugh was low and warm as he squeezed her hand. That was a rather unconventional introduction. "We've had an unconventional courtship," she pointed out, "if that's what this has been." "Oh, it has." His free hand came up to cup her cheek. "From the moment I heard about the cursed woman of Willow Creek, I was intrigued. Then I saw you so beautiful, so guarded, carrying a weight no one should bear alone, and I knew I wanted to be the one to help you set it down." "Is that why you offered me the job?" "Out of pity?" "Not pity," he corrected firmly. "Admiration. You'd endured so much, lost so many people, yet you kept going. That takes a special kind of strength." His thumb traced the curve of her cheekbone. "I offered you the job because I wanted you near me, because even then, I suspected what I know for certain now." "And what's that?" she whispered, though she could see the answer in his eyes. "That I love you, Nora Harrington. That you're not a curse, but a blessing, my blessing." He leaned forward, his forehead touching hers. "I've known it since the day you decided to stay. I was just waiting for you to be ready to hear it." Their first kiss was gentle, a tentative exploration that quickly deepened into something more passionate. When they finally broke apart, breathless and smiling, Nora felt as though every moment of her life, every loss, every fear, every choice had led her to this moment, this man. "Widow Peterson says you're going to make an honest woman of me," she teased, still cradled in his arms. "Is that so?" His eyes danced with amusement. "And what does Widow Peterson suggest for the timing of such an event?" "She mentioned that her Henry only courted her for 2 weeks. Beau pretended to consider this. 2 weeks seems excessive given that we've been courting in all but name for months now." "What are you suggesting, Mr. Preston?" His expression grew serious. "I'm suggesting, Miss Harrington, that life on the frontier is uncertain and precious, and I don't want to waste another day not being your husband." He took her hands in his. "I don't have a ring yet, and this isn't how I plan to do this, but Nora Harrington, will you marry me?" Joy bubbled up inside her, as pure and unexpected as a desert spring. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you, Beau Preston." Their second kiss sealed the promise, and as Nora melted into his embrace, she marveled at how far she had come from the frightened, superstitious woman who had planned to flee to Boston. The curse that had defined her for so long was finally revealed for what it truly was, a shield she had constructed to protect herself from the pain of attachment, from the risk of loving and losing again. Beau had seen through it from the beginning, recognizing not a cursed woman, but a wounded soul in need of healing. In helping her find her way back to trust and hope, he had given her the greatest gift of all, the courage to embrace life with all its uncertainties and joys. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Willow Creek, with Widow Peterson as their witness and the entire town in attendance. The same community that had once whispered about Nora's curse now celebrated her happiness, filling the church with flowers and well wishes. As they exchanged vows, Nora looked into Beau's eyes and saw her future reflected there, not a cursed existence of isolation and fear, but a blessed life of partnership and love. "I take you, Beau Preston, to be my lawfully wedded husband," she said, her voice clear and steady, "to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." The words held no fear for her now. Death would come eventually, as it came to everyone, but until then, there was life to be lived, love to be shared, joys to be experienced. The curse was broken not by magic or miracle, but by the simple, profound recognition that loss was the price of love, and love was worth the cost. As they walked out of the church as husband and wife, the afternoon sun bathed Willow Creek in golden light. Nora looked around at the town that had once seemed a place of tragedy and saw instead a community of resilience and hope. She looked at Beau, whose belief in her had never wavered, and felt a gratitude so deep it brought tears to her eyes. "What are you thinking, Mrs. Preston?" he asked softly as they made their way toward the wagon that would take them back to their ranch, their home. "I'm thinking," she replied, squeezing his hand, "that I'm the luckiest woman in the Arizona territory." "Not lucky," he corrected, lifting her hand to his lips. "Blessed." And as they rode toward their future together, Nora knew that he was right. The curse had never been real, but the blessing, the precious blessing of their love, most certainly was. In the years that followed, the Preston Ranch flourished under their joint care. Beau's knowledge of cattle breeding combined with Nora's eye for horseflesh created one of the most successful operations in the territory. They added to the main house, built a proper bunkhouse for their growing staff, and established a reputation for fair dealings and hospitality. Widow Peterson remained with them, becoming like a mother to Nora and eventually a grandmother to the children that arrived, first a son they named William, after Billy Peterson, then twin daughters, Sarah and Elizabeth. The widow's presence was a constant reminder of how life could surprise you, how death could be defied against the odds, how love could heal even the deepest wounds. As for the curse, it became a story Nora told her children on cold winter nights, a tale of superstition and fear, but also of courage and redemption. She taught them to face life's uncertainties with open hearts, to recognize that while loss was inevitable, it shouldn't prevent them from forming deep connections. "Your father taught me that," she would say, smiling across the room at Beau, gray now appearing at his temples, but still as handsome as the day they met. "He said I wasn't cursed. I was his blessing." "And you've been proving me right ever since," Beau would add, winking at their children, who never tired of hearing the story of how their parents found each other. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Beau surprised Nora with a special gift, a small silver locket engraved with the words, "Not cursed, but blessed." Inside was a miniature portrait of their family. "To remind you," he said as he fastened it around her neck, "of how far you've come, of what you've built from the ashes of your fears." Nora touched the locket, tears welling in her eyes. "I never dreamed I could be this happy, never believed I deserved it." "You deserved every happiness," he said, drawing her into his arms. "You just needed to believe it yourself." As they stood together on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard, Nora reflected on the strange, winding path that had brought her to this moment, the losses that had shaped her, the fear that had nearly defined her. the love that had ultimately saved her. She had once thought herself cursed, doomed to bring death to those she cared about. Now she knew the truth that life was both fragile and resilient, that love was both vulnerable and powerful, that she was neither cursed nor charmed, but simply wonderfully human. And as Beau's arm tightened around her waist, as their children's laughter floated on the evening breeze, as the sun set on another day in the life they had built together, Nora Harrington Preston knew with absolute certainty that she was indeed blessed beyond measure.